This story explores unsettling themes and may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised. There are towns that feel like a warm embrace, and then there are towns that feel like a perfectly crafted lie. Oakhaven, nestled deep in the Appalachian foothills, was undeniably the latter. From the moment you crossed the old stone bridge over the Whispering Creek, it presented itself as an idyllic slice of Americana, a postcard frozen in time. Quaint Victorian houses line streets shaded by ancient oaks, their branches heavy with Spanish moss. The town square, anchored by a proud bronze statue of its stern-faced founders, always buzzed with friendly chatter. Sun-drenched mornings gave way to golden afternoons, punctuated by the distant chime of the old church bell. But beneath that veneer of pastoral perfection, a cold, unsettling current always seemed to run, just out of sight, just out of reach. I never truly felt it until I came back. My name is Sarah Miller, and Oakhaven was my grandmother's town, a place I visited every summer as a child, a place I always thought I knew. But after Eleanor passed, leaving me her sprawling, slightly dilapidated house on the edge of town, I returned not as a visitor, but as an inheritor, an outsider tasked with sorting through a lifetime of memories and possessions. And that's when the cracks in Oakhaven's perfect facade began to show. Eleanor was a force of nature, a pillar of the community, known for her sharp wit and even sharper mind. She was a local historian, a walking encyclopedia of Oakhaven's past, always ready with a story about the Covenant Seven, the group of pious freedom-seeking souls who founded the town in the late 1700s. Their story, enshrined in every local textbook and celebrated annually on Founders' Day, was one of resilience, faith, and the forging of a new pure society in the wilderness. It was a beautiful narrative, a comforting myth that defined Oakhaven's very soul. But as I began the arduous task of clearing out her old study, a room steeped in the scent of aged paper and forgotten lavender, I stumbled upon something that shattered that myth into 1,000 chilling pieces. Tucked away behind a loose panel in the back of her towering mahogany writing desk, a desk that must have been a century old itself, I found a hidden compartment. It wasn't empty. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single leather-bound journal. It was thick, heavy, and clearly ancient, its covers embossed with a strangely stylized symbol I didn't recognize. The leather felt impossibly old, cool and dry against my fingertips, like something that had been waiting for centuries to be found. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The script inside was dense, archaic, written in a hand that was precise yet almost frantic in places. It took me a while to decipher the elegant, looping characters, but the name on the first page was unmistakable. Thomas Blackwood. One of the Covenant Seven. This wasn't just old history. This was his history. I expected to find tales of hardship, of spiritual devotion, of the struggle to build a new life in a rugged land. Instead, what unfolded on those brittle, yellowed pages was something far darker, far more unsettling. Blackwood wrote not of religious freedom, but of the great work. Not of founding a community, but of the sustenance. Not of piety, but of the pact. His entries were cryptic, laced with references to celestial alignments, specific moon cycles, and rituals performed under the cloak of deep forest shadows. He spoke of offerings and the harvest, of maintaining the balance to ensure Oakhaven's continued prosperity. There were chilling, almost clinical descriptions of procedures of renewal, and of a debt owed to something ancient and powerful embedded in the very earth beneath the town. The official history, the one Eleanor herself had so carefully curated and celebrated, painted the Covenant Seven as benevolent, almost saintly figures. Blackwood's journal, however, revealed a chillingly pragmatic, almost ruthless individual, driven by a purpose that had nothing to do with God or freedom, and everything to do with a horrifying secret agenda. The discrepancy was like a cold hand closing around my heart. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps Blackwood was a madman, a lone zealot whose dark imaginings never truly manifested. But then I started noticing things about Oakhaven, things I'd dismissed my entire life. The town's unusual, almost unnatural prosperity despite its remote location and lack of major industry. The unnerving closeness of its residents, a solidarity that felt less like community and more like a shared secret. The way they subtly, almost imperceptibly, discouraged outsiders from settling too deeply, from asking too many questions. And there were the stories, always whispered, never openly discussed, of people who just left. Not just a few, but a steady trickle over the centuries. Outsiders, drifters, even a few local eccentrics, always explained away as wanderlust, accidents in the wilderness, or simply moving on. But the sheer volume of these disappearances, when I thought about it now, felt far too high for a town of Oakhaven's size. I needed to talk to someone who might understand, or at least confirm I wasn't losing my mind. David Chun, my childhood friend, worked at the Oakhaven Public Library. He was a history buff, a quiet man who knew the town's archives better than anyone. I met him for coffee at the town's only diner, trying to keep my voice casual as I steered the conversation towards the town's founding. "You know, David," I began, stirring my lukewarm coffee, "Grandma Eleanor always loved the Founders' Day stories. Did anything ever strike you as odd about the Covenant 7? Any obscure documents? Anything that contradicted the official narrative?" David looked up from his tablet, his usually calm eyes seeming to dart away for a split second. "Odd? Sarah, you know Oakhaven's history. They were pioneers, deeply religious. Nothing odd about that, just hardscrabble beginnings." He gave a dismissive chuckle, but it sounded forced. "You're probably just feeling sentimental going through Eleanor's things. Old towns have old stories, that's all." His response was too quick, too neat. It wasn't honest dismissal, it was evasion. I saw a flicker in his eyes, a brief, almost imperceptible shift that suggested he knew more than he was letting on. It was a cold splash of suspicion. Back in Eleanor's house, alone with Blackwood's journal, the sense of unease deepened into outright paranoia. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside, felt amplified, sinister. I started feeling watched, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, even when all the windows were closed, all the doors locked. Objects around the house seemed to shift slightly. A book I'd left on the table would be on the shelf. A teacup would be moved from the sink to the counter. I tried to attribute it to stress, to grief, to my own overactive imagination. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. Founders' Day was fast approaching, and the town was already decorating. Banners depicting the Covenant 7, streamers in the town colors, and wreaths of dried local flora appeared everywhere. And then I saw it. The symbol. The same stylized, almost geometric design embossed on the cover of Blackwood's journal, etched into the first page beside his name, and sketched repeatedly within the cryptic entries. It was everywhere. On the banners, woven into the wreaths, even subtly incorporated into the new town emblem painted on the water tower. It was called the Mark of the Pact in Blackwood's journal. Here it was presented as a harmless, decorative flourish, a symbol of Oakhaven's heritage. My heart hammered against my ribs. Eleanor, the town historian, the woman who cherished Oakhaven's past, had owned Blackwood's terrifying journal. She had known. And that symbol, the Mark of the Pact, wasn't just history. It was active. It was now. Later that evening, fueled by a terrifying certainty, I went back to Eleanor's old desk. I ran my hand along the underside of the main drawer, searching. My fingers brushed against something rough, something carved into the aged wood. I pulled out a flashlight. There it was, the very same Mark of the Pact, not just a decorative carving but deeply etched, almost burned into the wood. Right next to it, almost invisible in the dim light, was a date. A date that aligned perfectly with the upcoming Founders' Day. The journal had spoken of the great work, culminating during the harvest moon cycle, a time of cleansing and renewal. Founders' Day, I now realized, was not just a celebration. It was a ritual. And the secret agenda of Oakhaven's founders was not a relic of the past. It was very much alive, and I had just walked right into the middle of it. The words cleansing and renewal echoed in my mind, a chilling mantra from a document centuries old. Founders' Day, I now realized, was not just a celebration. It was a ritual. And the secret agenda of Oakhaven's founders was not a relic of the past. It was very much alive, and I had just walked right into the middle of it. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of pure terror in the oppressive silence of the hidden room. The air felt thick, heavy with the dust of ages and the weight of unspeakable secrets. My fingers, trembling, fumbled for my phone. Every click of the camera shutter felt deafening, a gunshot in the tomb-like quiet. I photographed every page of the journal, every cryptic symbol, every chilling line. I knew I couldn't take the journal itself. Its absence would be noticed, and that would be a death sentence. But these images, these silent witnesses, they were my lifeline, my proof. Adrenaline coursed through me, sharpening my senses. I meticulously returned the journal to its exact spot, smoothing the aged pages, ensuring no crease, no smudge betrayed my intrusion. Then with painstaking care I slid the hidden panel back into place. The faint click was barely audible, yet it resonated like a thunderclap in my ears. I paused, listening. Nothing. Only the frantic thumping of my own heart. I retraced my steps through the labyrinthine shelves, my movements slow, deliberate, each shadow a potential watcher. The grand library, once a place of quiet contemplation, now felt like a predatory beast, its towering shelves the bars of a cage. I emerged into the main reading room, feigning a casual stroll, my gaze sweeping over the empty tables, the vacant chairs. The librarian, a stern woman named Mrs. Albright, was nowhere in sight. A small mercy, or perhaps a sign that I was already too late. I pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the crisp evening air, blinking against the lingering twilight. The quaint charm of Oakhaven now felt like a carefully constructed facade, a beautiful mask hiding a monstrous truth. Back in my small rented cottage, the images on my phone glowed, stark and terrifying against the dim light. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands still shaking, and sat at my kitchen table. The digital pages spread before me like a sinister tarot reading. The phrases jumped out at me. The chosen ones, the great sacrifice, the harvest moon's bounty, and always, cleansing and renewal. What kind of cleansing? What kind of renewal? My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation, but my gut screamed of something ancient and primal. This wasn't about spring cleaning or town beautification. This was about blood. About fear. Oakhaven had always prided itself on its low crime rate, its sense of community, its generations of families rooted deep in the town's soil. But as I scrolled through the journal entries, a different narrative began to form. There were mentions of unfortunate disappearances in the early records, people who simply vanished without a trace, always around the time of the Founders' Day festival. They were always outsiders or those who didn't quite fit in, those who questioned the town's traditions. I had dismissed them as historical anomalies, tragic but isolated incidents. Now they screamed of a pattern, a chilling ritualistic culling. A shiver ran down my spine, despite the warmth of the cottage. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, the distinct sensation of being watched. I walked to the window, peering through the lace curtains. The street was empty, bathed in the soft glow of the gas lamps that lined Main Street. But the feeling persisted. A cold, creeping certainty that I was no longer an unnoticed visitor. I was a person of interest. The next morning, the feeling intensified. As I walked to the local diner for breakfast, a familiar figure, Mr. Henderson, the town's jovial postmaster, greeted me with a wide, almost too wide smile. "Morning, Michael. Enjoying your research at the library yesterday?" His voice was light, but his eyes, usually twinkling with good humor, seemed to linger on me, a calculating glint beneath the friendly facade. "Always fascinating, those old town records, eh? So much history in Oakhaven." I managed a weak smile. "Oh, absolutely, Mr. Henderson. Just skimming through some of the old land deeds. Nothing too exciting." My lie felt flimsy, transparent. Did he know? Was he merely making polite conversation? Or was it a veiled warning? The casualness of his tone was unsettling. I spent the day trying to act normal, but my mind was a whirlwind of suspicion and fear. I needed help. I needed someone who knew Oakhaven better than anyone. Someone who might have heard whispers, seen things others dismissed. My thoughts turned to Samuel, the owner of Curio Corner, a dusty antique shop tucked away on a forgotten side street. Samuel was an enigma. He was an old man, perhaps in his late 70s, with a wispy white beard and eyes that seemed to have seen too much. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words were often laced with a cryptic wisdom that most people dismissed as the ramblings of an eccentric. I found him behind a counter piled high with forgotten trinkets, polishing a tarnished silver locket with a cloth. The air in his shop was thick with the scent of old wood, dust, and something else. Something faintly metallic like forgotten secrets. "Samuel," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to ask you about something." He slowly looked up, his eyes, the color of ancient river stones, fixed on me. He didn't speak, just waited, his gaze unervingly direct. "The town founders," I continued, lowering my voice, "and Founders' Day. Do you know anything about any old traditions? Anything unusual?" Samuel paused his polishing. He put the locket down, his movements deliberate. Unusual, you say? His voice was a low rasp, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Oakhaven is a town built on tradition, Michael. Some of them go back further than the official histories care to admit. I found something, I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. A journal, hidden in the library. It spoke of cleansing and renewal, of the chosen and the harvest moon's bounty. Samuel's eyes narrowed, and a flicker of something ancient and weary passed through them. He picked up a small, intricately carved wooden bird from the counter, turning it over and over in his gnarled fingers. The harvest moon, he murmured almost to himself, always the harvest moon. He looked at me then, a deep sadness in his gaze. Some secrets, Michael, are best left buried. The earth has a way of holding on to them, even when the people try to forget. What does it mean, Samuel? The cleansing? The chosen? I pressed, a desperate urgency in my tone. He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of generations. Oakhaven was founded by a peculiar group, Michael. They believed in purity, in maintaining a certain order. They believed the town was a sacred vessel, and sometimes a vessel needs to be purged, cleansed of impurities. He paused, his gaze drifting to the dusty shelves around us, filled with artifacts that seemed to whisper tales of the past. There used to be stories when I was a boy, whispers of people who just didn't belong, folks who moved here tried to change things, or even some who were born here but deviated from the path. They'd vanish, always around Founders Day. The official explanation was always a runaway or an accident, or just someone moving on without saying goodbye. But the whispers were different. My blood ran cold. The chosen ones, I repeated, the phrase from the journal now echoing with a horrifying clarity. Are they chosen for the cleansing? Samuel gave a slow, deliberate nod. In a way, they are chosen to maintain the purity, to ensure the tradition continues. And those who are deemed impure, they are chosen for the renewal. He looked at me, his eyes piercing. You've stumbled onto something dangerous, Michael. Something the town works very hard to keep hidden. The founders' agenda isn't just about stone and mortar. It's about blood and belief, and they will protect it with everything they have. As I left Samuel's shop, a chill wind swept through the streets, rattling the shop signs. The feeling of being watched was no longer a vague prickle. It was a physical presence, a weight on my shoulders. I glanced back at the antique shop, but Samuel had already disappeared into the shadows of his cluttered store. That night, alone in my cottage, the paranoia escalated. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside, sounded like footsteps approaching. I reviewed the journal pages again. The sacrifice must be pure. The offering must be willing, or made to seem willing. I realized with a sickening jolt that Samuel hadn't just been telling me about the past. He had been warning me about the present. And suddenly, the words of the journal took on a terrifying new meaning. The harvest moon approaches. The time for the great sacrifice draws near. The town will be cleansed. The chosen will ensure the renewal. Founders Day was less than 2 weeks away. And I, Michael, a curious outsider, had just marked myself as an impurity. I wasn't just investigating Oakhaven's secret agenda anymore. I was rapidly becoming a candidate for its cleansing. The words echoed in my mind, a chilling prophecy. Candidate for cleansing. The once quaint charm of Oakhaven now felt like a suffocating shroud. Every smile seemed a little too wide, every casual glance a little too long. The air, once crisp and inviting, now carried the faint scent of something metallic, something old and forgotten. Or perhaps it was just my imagination, a byproduct of a mind racing with fear and suspicion. I spent the next few days in a state of heightened alert, my senses dialed to 11. I walked the streets, not just observing but scanning. I saw Mrs. Gable, the sweet old woman who ran the bakery, avert her eyes when I passed, her usual cheerful wave replaced by a hurried retreat into her shop. David, the mechanic who had fixed my car with such friendly efficiency, suddenly seemed preoccupied, mumbling excuses about being too busy when I tried to engage him in conversation. The children, usually boisterous and carefree, would fall silent as I approached, their games pausing, their innocent stares lingering a moment too long before they scattered. Oakhaven was closing ranks. I was the anomaly, the unwanted variable in their carefully constructed equation. My phone, usually a lifeline to the outside world, felt like a dead weight. Calls to friends in the city went straight to voicemail, messages unanswered. Was it just bad service in this remote town, or something more sinister? I tried to access my banking app, my email, anything that connected me to my old life, but the internet was agonizingly slow, often cutting out entirely. It felt like a subtle digital amputation severing my ties one by one. I was being isolated, systematically cut off from any potential help. The clock on my laptop screen ticking down to Founders Day became a tormentor. 11 days, 10 days. Each passing hour was a reminder of the impending renewal and my precarious position. I knew I couldn't just sit there waiting to be cleansed. I had to find out more, to uncover the truth behind Oakhaven's dark secret before it consumed me. My only lead, my only potential ally was Emily. But after our last encounter, I wasn't sure if she would even speak to me. Then late one evening my phone buzzed. A text message. No caller ID, just a string of numbers I didn't recognize. The message was short, cryptic. The old mill. Midnight. Alone. Don't tell anyone. My heart hammered against my ribs. It had to be Emily. Who else would know to contact me or even dare to? Despite the gnawing fear, a flicker of hope ignited. This was my chance. The old mill stood on the outskirts of town, a skeletal silhouette against the moonless sky, its broken windows like vacant eyes staring into the darkness. It was a place locals avoided, whispered about being haunted, perfect for a secret meeting. I arrived early, parking my car a good distance away and approaching on foot, my senses on high alert for any movement, any sound that wasn't the rustling of leaves or the distant croaking of frogs. The air grew colder as I neared the weathered structure, carrying the faint metallic scent I'd noticed before, stronger now, almost coppery. I slipped inside the decaying building. Dust motes danced in the sliver of moonlight filtering through a gaping hole in the roof. The silence was absolute, heavy, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing. I waited, every shadow seeming to twist into a menacing shape. Then a soft cough broke the stillness. Emily emerged from behind a pile of decrepit machinery, her face pale in the gloom, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and urgency. "Michael, you shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You have to leave Oakhaven. Now, before it's too late." "Too late for what, Emily?" I pressed, stepping closer. "What is this cleansing? What's happening on Founders Day?" She wrung her hands, glancing nervously at the entrance. "I can't tell you everything. They're everywhere. They watch. But I can tell you this much. The renewal, it's not what they say it is. It's not about tradition. It's about power. And the founders, they found a way to keep it." "Keep what power?" I urged, my voice low but insistent. "And what does that have to do with me or any outsider?" Emily took a shaky breath. "The town, it needs something. Something pure. And it needs to be renewed regularly. The families of the founders, they've been doing it for generations. They believe it keeps Oakhaven prosperous, healthy, but it comes at a cost. A terrible cost." She paused, her gaze fixed on something beyond me, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. "Outsiders, they're seen as impurities. They disrupt the balance. They're sacrifices." My blood ran cold. Sacrifices. The word hung in the air, a chilling revelation. Sacrifices for what, Emily? What kind of power are we talking about? "The land, Michael," she whispered, leaning in closer, her voice barely a breath. "The earth beneath Oakhaven. The founders discovered something ancient here, something that demands a tribute. They built the town on it, around it, and they've been feeding it ever since. The cleansing is their way of ensuring its continued nourishment." My mind reeled. An ancient power? A demanding earth? It sounded like something out of a horror novel. Yet the look in Emily's eyes, the palpable fear radiating from her, told me this was terrifyingly real. "And Founders Day is when this nourishment takes place?" She nodded, her eyes darting nervously. "Every 20 years. It's always been outsiders. Travelers, drifters, people with no ties. But this time they're more desperate. The last renewal 20 years ago, something went wrong. The nourishment wasn't enough. The town has been struggling. They need a strong renewal. A potent one. And I'm a potent target because I've been digging?" I finished, the pieces clicking into place with a sickening thud. "Because I'm an outsider who's asked too many questions?" "You've tainted yourself in their eyes," Emily confirmed, her voice cracking. "You've become an impurity they believe will make the nourishment more effective. They think your defiance will somehow amplify the power. They believe it will ensure Oakhaven's prosperity for another 2 decades. The sheer barbarity of it left me speechless. This wasn't just a secret agenda. It was a horrifying generational ritual of human sacrifice, masked by quaint tradition and hidden in plain sight. "How do you know all this, Emily?" I asked, a new suspicion creeping in. Are you part of it?" Her eyes welled up. "My family, they're one of the founding families, Michael. I grew up with the stories, the hushed whispers, but I never truly believed it until I saw. 20 years ago. I was just a child, but I saw what they did. What they really did. And I've lived with the guilt ever since." Her voice dropped to a near inaudible whisper. "They forced me to participate in a small way. I couldn't stop them then. But I can try to warn you now." "What did you see, Emily?" I pressed, though I almost dreaded the answer. She shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. Not here. Not now. Just know that the renewal involves the Heartstone. It's beneath the Founders' Memorial in the town square. They believe it's what connects them to the land, to the ancient power. And on Founders' Day at midnight, they perform the ritual there. The Founders' Memorial, the centerpiece of the town square, a seemingly innocuous stone monument. It all made a terrifying, twisted kind of sense. The founders, their families, their secret agenda. The prosperity of Oakhaven built on a foundation of blood. "You have to get out, Michael," Emily pleaded, grabbing my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "They already know you're meeting me. They suspect I'm helping you. You exposed me tonight just by coming here. They have eyes everywhere. You need to leave now, before they come for you, before they come for us." Her words were punctuated by a faint, rhythmic thudding sound from outside, growing louder. It wasn't footsteps. It was something heavier, more deliberate. A vehicle moving slowly, purposefully in our direction. Panic flared in Emily's eyes, mirroring my own. "Go," she urged, pushing me towards a crumbling wall section. "There's a gap in the fence behind the mill. Run. Don't look back." The thudding grew louder, closer. Headlights cut through the trees, sweeping across the abandoned mill. They weren't just passing by. They were coming for us. Emily's face was a mask of terror, her warning more desperate than ever. I had to believe her. I had to run. The cleansing wasn't just a threat. It was a countdown to a brutal, ancient ritual, and I was the chosen offering. My only option was to escape Oakhaven, or expose its horrifying truth. And with that thought, I plunged into the darkness behind the mill, the metallic scent of blood and fear clinging to the air, the rhythmic thudding of whatever was approaching growing deafeningly loud behind me, knowing that Emily was now in mortal danger because of my quest for the truth. I spun, heart hammering against my ribs, the metallic tang of blood and fear now overwhelming. The rhythmic thudding was no longer distant. It was right behind me, a monstrous, grinding rumble that vibrated through the very ground. I didn't have time to process what it was. A colossal shadow, darker than the moonless night, loomed, a hulking mass of rusted metal and splintered wood, propelled by an unseen force. It wasn't a person. It was a machine, an ancient, repurposed logging winch, its massive drum and cable removed, replaced by a sharpened, heavy timber like a battering ram, mounted low to the ground. It was being driven, slowly but inexorably, directly at me. Adrenaline surged, a bitter taste in my mouth. I dove, a desperate, clumsy lunge into the decaying undergrowth beside the mill wall, just as the ram-like timber sheared through the air where I'd stood a fraction of a second before. The impact against the rough stone wall sent a shower of ancient mortar and dust exploding into the night. I felt the wind of its passage, the violent tremor of the collision, and then the screech of protesting metal as the driver, whoever they were, wrestled the crude vehicle backwards, preparing for another pass. My head spun. Who would drive something like this? And why? I scrambled deeper into the thorny bushes, trying to make myself invisible, my breath ragged and loud in my own ears. I risked a glance. Through the gaps in the machinery, I saw a figure in the driver's seat. Only a silhouette, bulky and indistinct against the faint, hazy glow of the town lights filtering through the mill's upper windows, but undeniably human. They were looking for me. "Emily!" I hissed, my voice a strained whisper choked with fear. No answer. The mill, usually a symphony of creaks and groans, was eerily silent now, save for the idling rumble of the monstrous machine and the frantic pounding of my own heart. "Emily, where are you?" Panic, cold and sharp, began to truly set in. I told her to stay hidden. Had she? Or had she been discovered? The metallic scent of blood was stronger now, mixed with the damp earth and the sickly sweet smell of decay. My eyes darted wildly, searching for any sign of her, any movement. Nothing. The driver of the improvised ram began to maneuver it again, slowly turning the massive vehicle. Its single dim headlight, caked with mud, swept across the ground, illuminating patches of weeds, discarded tools, and then with a sickening lurch, a dark stain on the cracked concrete near where Emily had been waiting. My blood ran cold. It looked like blood. Fresh. A guttural cry escaped me, a sound of pure terror and desperation. I burst from the bushes, ignoring the thorns tearing at my clothes and skin. "Emily!" I screamed, my voice raw. I ran towards the stain, my mind racing, constructing horrific scenarios. Had they gotten to her? Was that her blood? As I reached the spot, the headlight beam swung back, catching me squarely. I saw it clearly now. Not just a stain, but a small dark red puddle still glistening wetly. And next to it, partially obscured by a fallen timber, was Emily's backpack, its strap torn, lying haphazardly on the ground. Her phone, which she always kept meticulously in a side pocket, was nowhere in sight. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just a warning. This was an attack. And Emily was gone. The machine roared to life, the driver having completed their turn. It was coming for me again, its massive timber arm lowered, aiming to crush me against the mill wall. I was exposed, vulnerable, my mind reeling with the horrifying implications of Emily's disappearance. But I couldn't just stand there. My eyes darted around, searching for an escape, a weapon, anything. The mill loomed beside me, a dark behemoth. Its main entrance was too far, too exposed. But then I remembered something Emily had pointed out earlier, a detail I dismissed as unimportant. A small, rusted access door, half hidden by overgrown ivy on the side wall, much closer to where I stood. It looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. With the grinding motor of the ram growing deafeningly loud behind me, I launched myself towards the door. My fingers scrabbled at the ancient, corroded handle. It was stiff, refusing to budge. The machine was almost on me. I heard the splintering wood as its ram struck the wall inches from my head. I put my shoulder into the door, heaving with all my might, a desperate primal scream tearing from my throat. With a groan of tortured metal and a shower of rust, the door gave way, swinging inward just enough for me to squeeze through. I tumbled into absolute darkness, landing hard on something soft and yielding. The door slammed shut behind me with a resounding clang, muffling the roar of the machine outside. I lay there for a moment, gasping, disoriented, the metallic taste of fear still strong. The air inside was thick with the scent of dust, decay, and something else. Something chemical like old dyes or industrial solvents. My hand brushed against the soft thing I'd landed on. It was a pile of old rotted burlap sacks. Slowly, carefully, I pushed myself up. My eyes, still adjusting to the profound darkness, began to discern faint outlines. I was in a narrow, forgotten corridor, barely wide enough for one person, leading deeper into the mill's bowels. The sounds from outside were now distant, muffled, but the threat felt no less immediate. Emily was out there, or worse, she was taken. And whoever was driving that machine knew I was inside. I fumbled for my phone, pulling it out, its screen a blinding beacon in the oppressive gloom. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a scene of utter neglect. Cobwebs draped like funeral shrouds from the ceiling. Dust lay thick on everything. This part of the mill had clearly been abandoned for decades. As I moved forward, my flashlight beam danced over crumbling walls, rusted pipes, and silent, hulking machinery covered in thick canvas. The corridor twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the labyrinthine heart of the old building. I had to find Emily, but I also knew I couldn't face whatever was out there without more information, without understanding what was happening. This attack, this abduction wasn't random. It was connected. It had to be connected to the founders, to the secrets I was uncovering. My gaze fell upon a section of the wall that looked different. Unlike the rough, exposed brick and stone of the rest of the mill, this part was covered in smooth, dark wood paneling, warped and water-stained with age. It seemed out of place, almost like a deliberate attempt to conceal something. Driven by a desperate hunch, I ran my hands over the panels. They felt solid, immovable. But then my fingers brushed against a faint seam, almost imperceptible, where two panels met, not quite flush. I pressed, pushed, even kicked lightly, but nothing. Then my thumb caught on a tiny, almost invisible indentation. a small circular depression in the wood. It felt like a button or a cleverly disguised latch. I pressed harder. With a soft click that echoed unnervingly in the silence, a section of the paneling swung inward, revealing a gap, a sliver of deeper darkness beyond. My heart hammered with a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was it, a hidden passage. I squeezed through the narrow opening, emerging into a small circular room. The air here was even colder, stiller, carrying a faint, musty scent of old paper and something else. Something metallic like stale iron. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating shelves carved into the stone walls, filled not with tools or machinery, but with stacks of leather-bound ledgers, wooden boxes, and rolled-up parchments. This wasn't just a forgotten storage room. This was a vault, a secret archive. My hands trembled as I reached for the nearest ledger. The leather was dry and cracked, the pages brittle. I carefully opened it. The handwriting was elegant, looping script, faded but still legible. Dates, names. The names of the town's founders: Josiah Vance, Thomas Blackwood, Eleanor Albright, the very individuals whose names adorned the town square, the benefactors, the pillars of the community. But the entries weren't about town planning or charitable donations. They were meticulous records of land acquisitions, yes, but for properties far outside the town limits, properties that seemed to hold no conventional value. There were also strange numerical sequences, followed by cryptic single-word entries: harvest, pact, yield. My eyes scanned frantically, trying to make sense of the fragmented information. One page, dated almost 2 centuries ago, detailed the acquisition of the very land the mill stood on, referring to it not as industrial property but as the gateway. Another entry, dated just a few decades later, spoke of the Great Cleansing, followed by a chillingly dispassionate tally of names, many of which I recognized as founding families that had mysteriously vanished from the town's history books. I pulled out a rolled-up parchment. It was a map, not of the town as it was, but of its original layout, overlaid with strange geometric symbols. These symbols connected the mill, the old church, the cemetery, and several other now demolished buildings, forming an intricate pattern. At the center of this pattern, marked with a symbol that looked disturbingly like a stylized human figure being consumed by flames, was the exact location of the town's oldest well, the one Emily and I had investigated just hours ago. The secret agenda of the town's founders, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. This wasn't about money or power in the conventional sense. This was something far darker, something ritualistic, horrifying. The harvest, the pact, the gateway. They were not just building a town, they were building something else. As I stared at the map, my mind reeling, a new sound pierced the silence of the hidden room. Not the distant rumble of the ram, but a distinct, soft thump from the corridor outside, followed by the faint shuffle of footsteps. Someone was in the hidden passage. Someone knew this room existed. Someone was coming for me, and I was trapped. The soft thump had been the sound of a door, or perhaps a panel, opening into the hidden passage. The shuffle of footsteps, light but deliberate, confirmed it. Someone was not just near the passage, they were in it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of the ancient room. The air, already thick with dust and the scent of forgotten things, suddenly felt impossibly thin. Every nerve-ending scream, demanding action, but my mind, for a terrifying second, froze. I squeezed my eyes shut, then snapped them open, frantically scanning the small space. The hidden room was barely larger than a walk-in closet, lined with rough-hewn timber, a single flickering lantern casting long, dancing shadows. There was nowhere to go. No other door, no window, not even a loose floorboard that looked promising. My gaze darted back to the wall panel I'd stumbled through, my only entrance, and now my only potential exit. It was a solid piece of wood, flush with the wall, cleverly disguised. But how did it lock? I hadn't noticed a latch or a bolt on the inside. Had it simply swung shut, relying on gravity and its snug fit? If so, I could push it back open. But if it had automatically locked, I was truly trapped. The footsteps grew louder, closer. They were slow, methodical, not a panicked rush, but a measured approach. This person wasn't stumbling upon the passage. They knew exactly where they were going. They knew this room existed. The ram, that ominous, rhythmic thump-thump-thump from the town hall above, was now a distant, almost comforting background noise compared to the immediate, terrifying proximity of the unknown. I pressed myself against the furthest wall, trying to become one with the shadows, though the lantern's glow made it a futile effort. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, searching for... what? My phone? A pen? Pathetic. I needed a weapon, anything. My fingers closed around a heavy, tarnished brass candlestick I'd noticed on a small, dusty shelf. It was solid, substantial. Not ideal, but better than nothing. I gripped it tight, my knuckles white, the cold metal a small anchor in the rising tide of panic. Then the footsteps stopped. Right outside the panel. I held my breath, every muscle tensed. I could hear the faint scrape of fabric, a soft sigh, and then a distinct metallic click. My blood ran cold. A lock. There was a lock. And it had just been disengaged. A sliver of light appeared. A thin vertical line where the panel met the wall, widening as the door began to swing inward, slowly, silently. I pressed myself harder against the wall, trying to melt into the shadows, gripping the candlestick like a lifeline. The light from the hidden passage spilled in, a dim, unsettling glow that swallowed the feeble flicker of my lantern. A figure stepped into the room. It was a man. Tall, slender, dressed in dark clothing, his silhouette stark against the faint light from the passage. He moved with an unsettling grace, his head turning slowly, methodically, scanning the room. He wasn't looking at me directly yet, but rather at the general space, as if confirming something. His face was obscured by the shadows cast by the brim of a wide-brimmed hat, pulled low. I couldn't make out any features, only the sharp angle of his jaw, the serious set of his shoulders. He carried no lantern, no flashlight. The dim light from the passage seemed to be enough for him. This told me he was familiar with this place, perhaps even its darkness. He took a few steps further in, his gaze sweeping over the old wooden crates, the stacked scrolls, the ancient maps I'd been examining just moments before. He paused, his head cocked slightly as if listening. For me? Or for something else? My heart was a frantic hummingbird in my chest, threatening to burst. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The candlestick felt heavy, useless. How could I fight this person, whoever he was, who moved with such chilling confidence in this secret space? He walked past the central table, his hand brushing lightly over the stack of documents. He didn't pick them up, didn't seem to be searching for anything specific on the table. Instead, his eyes were drawn to the far wall, where a large framed tapestry hung, depicting a stylized oak tree with roots reaching deep into the earth. It was old, faded, but clearly significant. He approached it, his fingers tracing the outline of one of the roots. Then he stopped. He turned his head, slowly, directly towards the corner where I was trying to disappear. My breath hitched. Had he seen me? Was this it? My mind raced, calculating angles, escape routes, the efficacy of a brass candlestick against whatever this man represented. But he didn't advance. He just stood there, perfectly still, for what felt like an eternity, his shadowed gaze fixed on my hiding spot. "I know you're here," a low voice finally rumbled. It was calm, even devoid of surprise or anger, just a statement of fact. My blood ran cold. He hadn't seen me, he'd known I was here. How? Suddenly, a realization struck me. My lantern. I had left it burning. Its small, defiant flame, which had seemed so comforting moments ago, was now a beacon betraying my presence. I cursed my own oversight. "Come out," the voice continued, still calm, still unwavering. "There's no point in hiding. You've seen enough to understand the gravity of your situation." My mind whirled. Gravity of my situation? What did that mean? Was he going to kill me? Or just detain me? The calm tone was more terrifying than any threat. It implied a certainty, a control that I utterly lacked. I debated. Should I rush him? Try to shove past him and make a break for the hidden passage? But he was taller, likely stronger, and clearly prepared. And if he knew I was here, he was certainly anticipating my moves. Slowly, carefully, I stepped out from the shadows, raising the candlestick slightly, more as a desperate shield than a weapon. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice raspy, betraying my fear. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that echoed eerily in the confined space. "A protector of what must remain hidden. And you, young man, have stumbled into the heart of it." He finally took off his hat, revealing a face that was older than I expected, etched with deep lines, a stern mouth, and eyes that were piercing, intelligent, and utterly devoid of warmth. I recognized him. Not from the town council, not from the historical society. This was Arthur Jenkins, the town's reclusive archivist. The man who managed the old library's special collections, who rarely spoke to anyone, always seemed to be lurking in the background of town events. I'd seen him once or twice, observing from a distance. Arthur Jenkins? I whispered, the name feeling foreign in this secret place. He nodded slowly. Indeed. And you are David Miller, the historian. Always so eager to dig up the past, aren't you? Some pasts are best left buried, David. There was no malice in his voice, just a chilling conviction. What is this place? What are you protecting? I pressed, trying to sound braver than I felt. Arthur Jenkins walked towards the central table, picking up one of the rolled maps I'd left unfurled. His gaze swept over the intricate lines, the faded ink. This is the heart of Havenwood, the true foundation. And what I protect is the future. He rolled the map back up with a deliberate motion, then placed it precisely back onto the stack. The founders of this town, David, were not just seeking a new place to settle. They were seeking a new way, a way to escape the chaos, the corruption, the inevitable decline they saw in the world outside. The secret agenda, I mused, the words from the old journal echoing in my mind. Precisely, Jenkins confirmed, his eyes still fixed on the documents. They believed they could build a perfect society here, a utopia free from external influence. But utopias, David, require careful tending, and absolute secrecy. He finally looked at me, his gaze unwavering. You've read their journals, haven't you? You've pieced together fragments, but you don't understand the full scope, the lengths they went to, the sacrifices they made, and the compromises that had to be maintained for generations. My mind raced. Sacrifices? Compromises? This sounded far more sinister than simply building a town on a hill. What kind of sacrifices? What compromises? Jenkins smiled then, a thin, humorless curve of his lips. The kind that ensure stability, the kind that keep the wolves at bay, the kind that require certain truths to be managed for the greater good. He took another step closer, and I instinctively tightened my grip on the candlestick. You disrupted a delicate balance, David. Your relentless curiosity has opened doors that were meant to remain sealed. And now the balance must be restored. By silencing me? I retorted, my voice gaining a defiant edge despite the tremor in my hands. He sighed, a sound of weary resignation. Silencing is a crude term. Let's call it reintegration. You will understand. You will come to see the necessity. You will become part of the solution, whether you wish it or not. My blood ran cold for a different reason now. This wasn't just about a secret. This was about me. He wasn't going to let me leave. Reintegration? What are you talking about? Jenkins merely gestured towards the hidden panel, which was still slightly ajar. There are other passages, David. Other rooms. Other truths. And other people who have come to understand over the centuries. You are not the first. Nor will you be the last. He turned, his back to me for a moment, and picked up a small, intricately carved wooden box from a shelf I hadn't noticed before, tucked away behind some dusty old ledgers. It was dark wood, inlaid with a subtle swirling pattern. He opened it, and though I couldn't see what was inside, he carefully removed something small, then closed the box with a soft click. When he turned back, he held a small glass vial. Inside, a clear, shimmering liquid. It caught the faint light, glinting innocently. My heart pounded anew. This is not a violent town, David, he said, his voice softer now, almost soothing, yet utterly chilling. Our methods are persuasive. Our intent is preservation. For everyone. He took another step, the vial held steadily in his hand. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, charged with an unspoken threat. I gripped the candlestick, my knuckles aching. I knew with absolute certainty that whatever was in that vial, it was not meant to help me. It was meant to make me understand, to reintegrate me into their secret, to ensure I would never reveal what I had found. I had to escape. Now, my eyes darted to the hidden panel, still slightly ajar. It was my only chance. Jenkins was focused on the vial, on his monologue, on my presumed acceptance. He was confident, and that confidence was my only weakness to exploit. You won't get away with this, I spat, trying to distract him to gauge his reaction. He didn't falter. We always do, David. For generations. Havenwood endures. As he took one more slow, deliberate step towards me, the vial glinting ominously, I made my move. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't planned beyond the next second. With a guttural cry, I lunged, not at him but past him, aiming for the narrow gap of the hidden panel. I swung the candlestick wildly, not to hit, but to create a momentary barrier, a flicker of movement to throw him off balance. He reacted faster than I anticipated. He sidestepped, a blur of dark clothing, and his hand shot out, not to grab me, but to swipe at the candlestick. The brass clanged against the wall as it was knocked from my grasp, sending a jolt up my arm. But the distraction had worked. I was through the opening, scrambling into the dark, narrow, hidden passage. I didn't stop to look back. I didn't wait to hear if he followed. The passage was a dizzying maze of rough-hewn stone and damp earth, a claustrophobic tunnel that twisted and turned. I ran blindly, my hands scraping against the rough walls, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint, distant light from the room I had just fled. I could hear nothing but the frantic pounding of my own heart, echoing in my ears. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get out, to escape Arthur Jenkins and his chilling reintegration. Every turn felt like a gamble, every dark stretch a potential trap. I knew he was behind me, or would be soon, navigating this labyrinth he knew so well. My only hope was to find an exit before he found me again. I continued to push forward, the darkness a suffocating blanket, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic and ancient. My flashlight beam danced wildly, illuminating fleeting glimpses of rough-hewn rock and crumbling brick. Every sound was amplified in the oppressive silence, my own ragged breathing, the frantic pounding of my heart, and the distant, almost imperceptible drip of water. I could feel Jenkins's presence, a cold phantom at my heels, a relentless hunter in his own twisted domain. He knew these tunnels like the back of his hand, every secret passage, every forgotten turn. My only advantage was the element of surprise, the hope that I might stumble upon an exit he hadn't anticipated me finding, or perhaps one he kept hidden for himself. The passage narrowed, forcing me to squeeze through a tight crevice before opening into a slightly larger cavern. It wasn't an exit, but it was different. The walls here were smoother, almost polished in places, and the air felt strangely still, devoid of the usual draft. A faint, almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the stone beneath my feet. My beam swept across the space, revealing not just natural rock, but sections of expertly cut masonry, indicative of human intervention, and ancient human intervention at that. Then I saw it. Tucked away in a recess, partially obscured by a fallen section of rock, was a heavy wooden door. It was old, the wood warped and splintered, but reinforced with thick iron bands, rusted nearly black. This wasn't just a tunnel, it was a sealed-off chamber. A surge of adrenaline, mixed with a chilling dread, coursed through me. What could be behind such a door deep beneath the town? With a grunt I pushed against it. It groaned, resisting, but finally gave way with a low, mournful creak that echoed ominously through the cavern. The air that rushed out was stale and cold, carrying a faint, musty scent of old paper and something else, something indefinable, almost sterile. Stepping inside, my flashlight cut through absolute darkness. This was no natural cave. This was a room meticulously carved out of the earth. In the center stood a heavy oak table, surprisingly well preserved, and upon it, a collection of objects that sent a shiver down my spine. There were no cobwebs, no dust motes dancing in the beam. It was as if someone had been here recently, or perhaps the air itself was somehow preserved. My light fell upon a stack of leather-bound journals, their covers faded and cracked with age, but their pages surprisingly intact. Beside them lay a series of intricate maps, not of the town as it was now, but of the geological strata beneath it, crisscrossed with arcane symbols and annotations. There were also strange, delicate instruments, brass and copper devices with lenses and dials, unlike anything I had ever seen, resembling a bizarre fusion of a compass and a seismograph. My gaze was drawn to the journals. The topmost one was open, a faded quill pen lying beside it. The handwriting, though elegant, was tight and precise. I carefully picked it up, my fingers tracing the brittle cover. A name was embossed on it: Elias Thorne, one of the town's founders. My breath hitched. This was it. This was the core of the secret. I began to read, the words on the yellowed pages slowly pulling me into a world of ambition, obsession, and chilling discovery. Elias Thorne's entries detailed not just the establishment of the town, but its very purpose. He wrote of a unique geological phenomenon beneath the valley, a confluence of mineral deposits and subterranean water flows that created a rare, potent energy field. He called it the resonance. His initial entries spoke of the resonance's beneficial properties: enhanced creativity, heightened intuition, a sense of profound well-being among those exposed to it. This was why they chose this valley, not for its fertile land or strategic location, but for the power pulsating beneath it. The town, Oakhaven, was built as a living experiment, a community designed to thrive within this unique energetic environment. But as I turned the pages, the tone shifted. Thorne's enthusiasm curdled into something darker, more clinical. The resonance, he discovered, wasn't uniformly beneficial. For some, it amplified their deepest anxieties, their dormant pathologies. It could induce paranoia, delusions, even violent outbursts. He began to refer to these individuals as dissonant, those whose internal frequencies clashed with the resonance. My eyes scanned frantically, words blurring into a horrifying tapestry. Thorne, along with the other founders, had developed a system. They couldn't simply abandon the project. The resonance was too valuable, too unique. They believed it held the key to unlocking humanity's next evolutionary stage, or at least a profound advancement in energy and consciousness. So they decided to manage the dissonance. The maps on the table, I now realized, weren't just geological. They were also diagrams of the town's original layout, overlaid with notations indicating specific energy nodes and pathways. The placement of the church, the town hall, even the old mill, they weren't arbitrary. They were designed to channel and focus the resonance, or perhaps to contain its more volatile aspects. And then I found it. A chilling entry dated decades after the town's founding. The reintegration protocol has proven effective. The dissonant individuals, once identified, are gently guided towards areas of focused resonance. Their energies are then realigned, recycled, and returned to the collective field. It is a necessary process for the stability of Oakhaven and the continued study of the resonance. A small sacrifice for the greater good. My blood ran cold. Realigned, recycled, and returned to the collective field. It echoed Jenkins's words, but with a terrifying clarity. They weren't just treating people, they were using them. The reintegration wasn't a cure. It was a systematic absorption, a consumption of the dissonant individual's life force or consciousness to fuel or stabilize this mysterious resonance. The institution, the sanitarium where Jenkins worked, was merely the operational facility for this gruesome process. I flipped through more pages, my hands trembling. Thorne documented the gradual decline of some of the original townspeople, their increasing erratic behavior, their eventual reintegration. He noted the subtle shifts in the resonance after each event, almost as if these individuals were batteries, their essence being drained to power something unseen. The delicate instruments on the table suddenly made sense. They were not just to detect the resonance, but perhaps to measure and control its interaction with human subjects. The founders weren't just scientists. They were cult leaders, orchestrating a grand, horrifying experiment with the lives of their unsuspecting townsfolk. A sudden sharp metallic clang echoed from the tunnel outside the chamber. My head snapped up, fear seizing me. Jenkins. He was close. He must have heard the door creak, or perhaps he had been tracking me more effectively than I thought. I had to move. I couldn't leave this information behind. I frantically grabbed the topmost journal, Thorne's main log, and several of the most detailed maps, stuffing them into my backpack. The weight of them felt like a leaden burden, but also a lifeline. This was proof. Proof of Oakhaven's dark heart, of its monstrous foundation. Another sound, closer this time. A heavy thud, followed by the unmistakable scrape of boots on stone. He was in the outer cavern. I could almost feel his cold, predatory gaze searching for me. My eyes darted around the chamber. There had to be another way out. A hidden passage Thorne might have built for emergencies. My flashlight beam frantically searched the walls, revealing nothing but solid rock. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping dread that threatened to paralyze me. Then, I noticed a subtle discoloration in the stone behind the oak table, almost imperceptible against the naturally variegated rock. It wasn't a crack, but a faint line perfectly straight, suggesting a concealed door. With renewed urgency, I scrambled behind the table, my fingers tracing the line. There was a faint indentation, a small, cleverly hidden latch. Pressed it. With a soft click, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage, steeper and rougher than the main tunnels. It was barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, closer. Jenkins was entering the chamber. I could hear his labored breathing, a low guttural sound that sent shivers down my spine. There was no time to hesitate. I plunged into the hidden passage, pulling the concealed door shut behind me, praying it would latch from the inside. The darkness was absolute, suffocating. I could hear Jenkins's voice, a low rumble, from the chamber I had just left. He was calling my name, his voice distorted by the stone, but laced with a chilling certainty. "Michael, I know you're in here. Don't make this difficult. It's for your own good. For Oakhaven's good." His words, now imbued with the horrifying truth I had just uncovered, were more terrifying than any threat. He wasn't just a deranged man. He was an enforcer of a decades-old town-wide conspiracy. I was no longer just running from a madman. I was running from the very foundation of Oakhaven itself. The passage sloped sharply downwards, the air growing colder, heavier. I had escaped Jenkins for now, but I was plunging deeper into the unknown, carrying a truth that could shatter an entire town. A truth that Jenkins and the legacy of Elias Thorne would kill to keep buried. My only thought was survival, and finding a way to expose this monstrous secret before I became another reintegrated statistic. I needed to get out. The sterile white walls of the reintegration wing suddenly felt like the padded cells of a madhouse, and I was the next patient scheduled for permanent residency. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the empty corridor. They knew I knew, or at least they would soon. Jenkins's calm, chilling voice echoed in my mind, promising a future of compliant bliss, a future where I was no longer me. I pressed myself against the wall, straining my ears. Footsteps, distant but approaching. They were coming for me. My gaze darted around, searching for an exit, any weakness in the gleaming, impenetrable facade of this place. The door I'd slipped through, the one leading to the restricted archives, was now a potential trap. I couldn't go back that way, it was too obvious. I remembered a service tunnel I'd spotted earlier, disguised as a maintenance access panel near the loading dock. It was a long shot, but my only shot. I moved quickly, silently, my breath catching in my throat with every step. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but a cold defiance settled in. I wouldn't let them win. Not after what I'd seen, what I'd understood. The panel was there, surprisingly unlocked, almost as if it had been left that way, a forgotten oversight in their meticulously controlled environment. Adrenaline surged. I pulled it open, slipped inside, and closed it behind me with a soft click. Darkness enveloped me, thick and absolute, broken only by the faint glow of my phone screen. The tunnel was narrow, smelling of dust and damp earth, a stark contrast to the antiseptic air of the facility. I moved forward, hands outstretched, feeling my way through the oppressive black, the rhythmic thud of my own footsteps echoing in the confined space. The tunnel stretched endlessly, a suffocating tube of concrete and earth. Every few yards, a faint, rhythmic hum vibrated through the floor, a low thrumming that seemed to emanate from the very bedrock of Oakhaven. It wasn't the sound of machinery, not exactly, but something deeper, more organic, like a giant slumbering beast. Was this part of the foundational mechanism Emily hinted at? Or just the mundane infrastructure of the facility? In my heightened state, every sound, every shadow was a potential clue or a harbinger of doom. My phone's battery was critically low, a cruel reminder of my isolation. I couldn't risk using its light for long. I stumbled, scraped my knee, but ignored the pain. The cold, hard truth of what Oakhaven truly was had cauterized all lesser sensations. I was running on pure adrenaline and a desperate primal need to survive and expose. As I crawled, my mind raced, piecing together fragments. The historical documents, the coded ledgers, the strange, almost hypnotic calm of the townspeople, the disappearance of anyone who questioned the status quo. It wasn't just about control. It was about reshaping reality, enforcing a specific engineered vision of society. Elias Thorne hadn't just founded a town. He'd founded a social experiment, a living laboratory where dissent was eradicated and conformity was absolute. This wasn't just about my freedom. It was about the freedom of everyone in Oakhaven. They were living a lie, a carefully constructed illusion maintained by the very people sworn to protect them. Jenkins wasn't just a director. He was a gatekeeper, a high priest of Thorne's twisted ideology. The tunnel eventually opened into a musty, forgotten basement, clearly outside the main facility. I clambered out, my muscles aching, and found myself in the dilapidated storage area of an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of Oakhaven. Fresh air, even stale and dust-laden, felt like a miracle. But I wasn't safe. Oakhaven was a closed system, a meticulously designed trap. Every road out was monitored. Every face was potentially an informant. I needed to get to a phone to the outside world, but I couldn't trust anyone. Not yet. Oakhaven was a meticulously planned ecosystem, but one where the apex predator was the system itself. The smiles, the politeness, the unwavering adherence to tradition. It was all part of the act, a meticulously choreographed ballet of conformity. And I, the outsider, the curious journalist, had unwittingly stepped onto the stage, disrupting the performance. Now the stagehands were coming for me, not to remove me quietly, but to reintegrate me into the very play I was trying to expose. The weight of this realization was crushing. How many people had come before me? How many had seen the cracks, tried to speak out, only to be silenced, their identities erased, their wills bent to Thorne's agenda? The thought fueled my resolve. I couldn't let their sacrifices be in vain. I wouldn't become another lost soul in Oakhaven's meticulously curated oblivion. My first priority was to get proof. Something undeniable. The documents I'd seen, the data files. They were still in the archives, locked away. Going back was suicide. I needed another way. I decided to head towards the town square, the heart of Oakhaven, not to expose myself, but to observe, to look for a weakness, a crack in their perfect facade. I needed to blend in, to become invisible. I pulled my hoodie tighter, keeping my head down, moving through the back alleys and overgrown paths. The town was eerily quiet for a mid-afternoon. Too quiet. As I skirted the edge of the park, I saw a familiar figure. Emily, the librarian. She was sitting on a bench, a book in her hands, but her gaze was fixed on the Thorne clock tower. Its gilded hands perpetually stuck at 5 minutes to 12, a silent, ominous monument. She looked troubled, not the usual serene Emily. I hesitated. Approaching her was a risk. But what if she was looking for an answer too? What if she felt the same unease I did? I watched her for a long moment. Then she did something strange. She slowly closed her book, not putting it in her bag, but holding it open almost deliberately, facing outwards. It was a copy of the Oakhaven Chronicle, a collection of early town histories. My gaze fell on a specific page she had marked, highlighted even. A passage about Elias Thorne's vision for societal harmony, and a subtle, almost hidden reference to a foundational mechanism beneath the town's oldest structures, designed to maintain order. The Oakhaven Chronicle passage. It wasn't just a casual read. The way she held it, the specific highlight. It was a message, carefully crafted to appear innocuous to anyone but someone looking for answers. Foundational mechanism. Maintain order. These weren't the flowery words of a town history. They were the chilling lexicon of control. What if the clock tower, perpetually stuck, wasn't just symbolic but a physical part of this mechanism? A timer, a reset button, a silent witness to the town's manufactured reality? It seemed too fantastical, too much like a dystopian novel, yet everything I had experienced, everything I had uncovered, pointed to a reality far stranger and more terrifying than fiction. A chill ran down my spine. Foundational mechanism. It sounded like the kind of euphemism Jenkins would use. Was Emily trying to send a message? Was she aware, at least in part, of the truth? Just then, a sleek black sedan, the kind Jenkins's enforcers drove, glided past the park entrance, its tinted windows obscuring the occupants. Emily stiffened, her eyes flicking towards the car, then quickly back to her book. Her movements were subtle, but I saw the fear, the carefully suppressed terror in her eyes. She knew. I ducked behind a thick hedge, my heart pounding. The car paused briefly, then continued on its way. But the message was clear. They were watching. They were everywhere. Emily slowly rose, her book now tucked securely under her arm, and walked away, not towards the library, but towards the older, less frequented section of town, the historical district, where the Thorne family estate loomed like a silent sentinel. Her actions were deliberate. She wasn't just troubled, she was acting. And she had pointed me towards the foundational mechanism. Was it a physical device? A control center? And what did it have to do with the Thorne estate? I had to follow her. It was a dangerous gamble, but she was the first person I'd seen who showed any sign of independent thought, any crack in the Oakhaven facade. She was my only lead, my only hope for an ally. I waited until she was out of sight, then cautiously emerged from my hiding place. The air felt charged, every rustle of leaves, every distant sound a potential threat. I was no longer an observer. I was a hunted animal, moving through a meticulously constructed cage. As I followed Emily's path, keeping a safe distance, I felt eyes on me. Not necessarily human eyes, but the omnipresent gaze of the town itself. Every window, every shadow, seemed to hold a silent observer. I imagined Jenkins somewhere in his immaculate office, watching me on a screen, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. He was probably enjoying the hunt, confident that I was merely delaying the inevitable. But he underestimated me. He underestimated the power of truth, even when buried under generations of lies. The historical district was a maze of cobblestone streets and Victorian houses, their ornate facades hiding untold stories. The Thorne Estate, a sprawling mansion surrounded by high walls and ancient, gnarled trees, dominated the skyline. It was the heart of the town, both geographically and metaphorically. If there was a foundational mechanism, it would be there. My destination, the Thorne Estate, loomed larger with every step. It was the heart of the beast, the very source of Oakhaven's dark secret. And Emily, whether she knew it or not, was leading me directly to it. The path was set, the stakes were impossibly high, and the air crackled with the promise of either revelation or annihilation. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with the scent of damp earth and something acrid, metallic, like rust mixed with ozone. Emily moved with a disturbing grace, her steps silent, her eyes fixed on some unseen point ahead. We were no longer on a discernible path, but scrambling down a steep, overgrown embankment that led into what looked like an ancient, abandoned quarry. The sheer rock faces, scarred by centuries of weather and forgotten excavation, loomed over us, casting long, deep shadows even in the fading twilight. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the woods. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run, but a morbid fascination, a desperate need for answers, chained me to her trail. This was it. The precipice. The edge of Oakhaven's carefully constructed reality. We descended deeper, the world above shrinking to a sliver of bruised sky. The temperature dropped sharply, and a strange, low hum vibrated through the very ground. A sound felt more than heard, resonating in my bones. It was the sound of something ancient, something powerful stirring in its sleep. Emily led me to a narrow, almost invisible fissure in the quarry wall, hidden behind a curtain of thick vines and moss. Without hesitation, she slipped through, her silhouette swallowed by the darkness. I followed, pushing aside the cold, damp foliage, my flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive gloom. The passage was barely wide enough for one person, a winding tunnel of rough-hewn rock that sloped steeply downwards. The air grew even colder, the metallic tang sharper, and the low hum intensified, now a palpable pressure in my ears. I could hear Emily's soft, rhythmic breathing ahead, a strangely calming sound in the suffocating darkness. But it was a false calm. Her presence, her unwavering focus, was the only thing standing between me and utter panic. I gripped the cold rock walls, scrambling to keep my footing as the tunnel spiraled down, deeper and deeper beneath Oakhaven. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous space. My flashlight beam struggled to pierce the immensity of it. This wasn't a natural cave. The walls here were too regular, too smoothly carved, though ancient runic symbols, barely visible beneath centuries of grime, adorned them in intricate patterns. The air was still, heavy, and charged with an almost electric energy, and in the center of this colossal chamber, bathed in a faint, pulsing, otherworldly luminescence, was the beast. It wasn't a creature of flesh and blood, not in the way I'd imagined. It was something far more terrifying. A colossal, intricate structure, towering at least 40 feet high, made of a dark, obsidian-like material I couldn't identify. It pulsed with a soft, violet light that seemed to emanate from within its very core, casting long, dancing shadows across the cavern walls. It was a complex array of interlocking geometric shapes, crystalline formations, and polished, reflective surfaces that seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves in a slow, almost imperceptible rhythm. Thin, almost invisible tendrils of energy arced between different points on its surface, crackling silently. It looked like an ancient organic machine, an impossible fusion of technology and something primordial. And it was humming. The low thrum I'd felt in the quarry was now a deep, resonant bass note that vibrated through my entire body, a sound that seemed to rewrite the very air around it. My head swam, a wave of dizziness washing over me, and I felt a strange, compelling urge to simply stand and stare, to let its hypnotic energy consume me. Emily, oblivious to my struggle, walked directly towards it, her steps unhurried, almost reverent. She stopped at its base, where a circular platform of the same dark material extended outwards. Carved into this platform were more symbols, glowing faintly with the same violet light. She knelt, her hands resting gently on the cool, smooth surface. It was then I noticed what she carried, tucked in the crook of her arm, something she hadn't had before. A small, intricately carved wooden box darkened with age. With delicate, almost ritualistic movements, she opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried herbs, was a single, perfectly preserved human heart. My breath hitched in my throat. The air in the cavern seemed to solidify, pressing in on me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. A cold, sickening wave that threatened to drown me. This wasn't just a beast, it was an engine. An engine of prosperity, of influence, of control. And the founders of Oakhaven, those revered figures, hadn't just found this monstrosity. They had built it, or perhaps more accurately, they had harnessed it. The sacrifices weren't just a grim tradition, they were the fuel. The lifeblood that kept this arcane machine humming, that powered Oakhaven's unnatural luck, its eerie calm, its ability to lure and hold people. The missing townsfolk, the whispers of disappearances, the strange sense of being watched. It all coalesced into a horrifying tapestry of calculated, continuous horror. The founding families weren't just preserving a secret, they were perpetuating a dark bargain, a pact with something ancient and demanding, ensuring their lineage's power and Oakhaven's unnatural flourishing at an unspeakable cost. Emily carefully lifted the heart from its resting place. It pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, in her hands, mirroring the violet glow of the mechanism. She looked up, not at me, but at the towering structure, a faint beatific smile gracing her lips, her eyes still vacant, lost in some terrifying communion. She placed the heart into a small recessed cavity on the glowing platform. As it settled into place, the colossal structure pulsed brighter, the violet light intensifying, pushing back the shadows with a surge of energy that made the very air crackle. The low hum deepened into a resonant throb, vibrating through my bones, my skull, my very soul. The tendrils of energy arcing across its surface grew more numerous, more vibrant, dancing with a terrifying grace. A wave of intense cold washed over me, followed by a searing heat, then a profound sense of despair, as if all the suffering, all the stolen life force, was being funneled directly into my mind. I staggered back, pressing myself against the cold, rough wall, my vision blurring, my head pounding as if it would split open. The sheer malevolence emanating from the mechanism was overwhelming, a silent scream of countless stolen lives. This was the true secret of Oakhaven. Not just a monster in the woods, but a monstrous pact, an engine of dark power built on the very essence of human sacrifice, hidden beneath the veneer of a quaint, idyllic town. The founding families hadn't just founded a town, they had founded a carefully constructed prison, a harvesting ground. Suddenly, Emily stirred, her head tilting slightly. Her eyes, though still distant, seemed to register my presence for the first time. A flicker of something crossed her face, a brief spasm of confusion, quickly replaced by that same vacant serenity. But the damage was done. My presence, my horrified gasp, had broken the spell, even if only for a fraction of a second. The colossal mechanism pulsed again, this time with a violent, almost angry surge of light. The tendrils of energy arced more fiercely, and the hum escalated into a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the cavern. The air grew thick with a palpable sense of menace, and the shadow of the structure stretched, seeming to consume everything around it. Then from the darkness beyond the violet glow, I heard it. Footsteps. Not Emily's silent glide, but the heavy, deliberate tread of multiple people. They were coming from deeper within the cavern, from passages I hadn't even noticed. I was exposed. My cover was blown. I had witnessed the unspeakable, the heart of Oakhaven's evil, and now the guardians of that secret were closing in. The roar of the mechanism filled the cavern, a triumphant, hungry sound, as if it had just been fed, and was now fully awake, fully aware. And I was standing directly in its gaze, a trespasser, an intruder, a potential new offering. The roaring pulsed through the very stone beneath my feet, vibrating up my legs, a primal fear seizing my gut. The mechanism wasn't just active, it was alive. A vast, intricate contraption of polished obsidian and a strange, mottled metal I couldn't identify. It now glowed with an internal, sickly green light that cast grotesque shadows on the cavern walls. It wasn't just a machine, it was a hungry maw, an altar, a gateway. The central focus, a massive rotating sphere of the same black obsidian, began to spin faster, creating a low hum that quickly escalated into a high-pitched whine that grated on my teeth. From the base of the sphere, four enormous segmented arms, like the limbs of some ancient mechanical spider, extended outwards, their tips ending in razor-sharp, claw-like appendages. They moved with an unnerving grace, slowly reaching towards the center of the cavern, where I stood frozen. Panic surged, but my mind strangely was still racing, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. This wasn't some simple industrial press. This was something built with purpose, with a dark ritualistic intent. The air grew heavy, thick with a metallic tang mixed with something else, something sweet and cloying, like ozone and dried blood. The clawed arms were now directly above me, the green light intensifying, illuminating intricate carvings on the obsidian sphere. Symbols I'd never seen before, yet they felt ancient, potent. They depicted figures, humanoid but elongated, offering up what looked like glowing orbs to a larger, central entity. A disturbing realization began to form. This wasn't about destroying life, it was about harvesting it. I stumbled back, tripping over a loose rock, narrowly avoiding one of the descending claws that scraped against the stone floor where I'd just been, sending up a shower of sparks. The heat radiating from the mechanism was oppressive, a physical force pushing against me. My breath hitched. I had to move, had to escape this immediate danger, but where? The entrance was behind the mechanism, now seemingly blocked by its sheer size and active menace. My eyes darted around the cavern, searching for any exit, any reprieve. That's when I saw it. Tucked away in a shadowed recess, almost camouflaged by the natural rock formations, was a narrow fissure, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It looked unstable, dangerous, but it was my only chance. With renewed adrenaline, I scrambled towards it, the screech of the mechanism's arms following close behind. One of the claws slammed down, missing my heel by inches, the impact shaking the entire cavern. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. I contorted my body, pushing through the tight opening, scraping my shoulders and knees against the rough stone. The passage twisted downwards, a dark, unexplored tunnel, but it was away from that thing. I slid down a short, steep incline, landing hard on a cold, damp floor. The roar of the mechanism was still audible, though muffled, a constant, unsettling thrum in the distance. My flashlight beam cut through the absolute blackness of this new tunnel. It was clearly man-made, or at least deliberately widened. The walls were smooth in places, almost polished, unlike the rough natural rock of the main cavern. This wasn't just a natural fissure. It was a hidden escape route, or perhaps another secret passage. As I moved deeper, the air grew colder, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum replaced the distant roar of the mechanism. The passage opened into a smaller, circular chamber. In the center, bathed in a soft, ethereal blue light emanating from an unseen source, stood a single pedestal. On it rested a small, leather-bound journal. My heart hammered against my ribs. This had to be it. This had to be the key. I cautiously approached, my every sense on high alert. The journal was old, its leather cracked and faded, but the gold-embossed symbol on its cover was still discernible. A stylized image of the same elongated figures offering glowing orbs that I had seen carved on the obsidian sphere of the mechanism. I picked it up, my fingers trembling. The pages were brittle, but the ink was remarkably preserved. It was a diary written in a precise, elegant hand. The first entry was dated over 200 years ago, April 12, 1793. The work continues. The others grow restless, their faith wavering. But I know the truth. I have seen the signs. The earth here, it breathes, it offers, and we, its humble custodians, shall harness its bounty. My eyes scanned frantically, skipping pages, searching for answers. I found entries detailing the construction of the town, not as a simple settlement, but as a fortress, a sanctuary. The founders weren't just seeking a new life. They were seeking a new way of life, powered by something unnatural. October 5, 1795. The first harvest. It exceeded our wildest dreams. The town prospers, the soil yields impossibly, the ailments of the flesh diminish. Our chosen few are blessed. The mechanism works. The conduit is strong. Harvest. Conduit. What were they harvesting? And from whom? Or what? I flipped further, my breath catching in my throat. March 20th, 1801. A setback. One of the children, young Thomas, he strayed too far. The conduit. It took him. A small price for such prosperity, the elders assure me. But the screams, they haunt my sleep. We must be more vigilant. The source demands its due. A child. The mechanism took a child. The offerings weren't symbolic. They were real. And the glowing orbs in the carvings, were they souls? Life force? The very essence of existence? The journal went on to describe a cycle, a regular feeding of the mechanism. The town's prosperity, its pristine condition, the unusual contentment of its inhabitants. It all came at a horrific cost. The founders had tapped into something ancient, powerful, and utterly malevolent. A force that demanded sacrifice to sustain their idyllic existence. They weren't just building a town, they were cultivating a farm, and the residents were, unknowingly, the primary crop. The carefully curated sense of community, the unwavering trust, the subtle manipulations I'd observed. It was all a sophisticated system to ensure a steady supply of offerings. The annual harvest festival, the missing persons, the sudden departures. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a ritual. My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped the journal. The founders weren't benevolent leaders seeking a better life. They were cultists sacrificing their own descendants to an unseen entity, an insatiable hunger hidden beneath the very foundations of their perfect town. And the elders mentioned, they were the original founders, or their direct successors, maintaining this dark secret, ensuring the cycle continued. I thought of the current mayor, Mayor Davies, with his unervingly calm demeanor and his evasiveness. He was part of this. They all were, the ones in charge, the ones who knew. They were the shepherds, leading their flock to the slaughter, all for the sake of their own power, their own longevity, their town's unnatural grace. The blue light in the chamber intensified for a moment, making the strange symbols on the journal cover seem to pulse. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. I wasn't just investigating a mystery anymore. I had stumbled into a living, breathing nightmare, a covenant with something ancient and evil, playing out in plain sight for centuries. And I was now armed with the truth, a truth that could shatter their carefully constructed paradise. But also, a truth that made me a target. If the mechanism demanded its due, and I was a trespasser, then my discovery had just painted a very large, very bright target on my back. The elders would know I was here. They would know I knew. The hunt would begin, not for information, but for me. I had become the next potential offering. I had to get out. Not just out of this tunnel, but out of this town. And I had to expose them. But first, I needed proof, undeniable proof that couldn't be dismissed as the ravings of a madman. This journal was a start, but I needed more. I needed to understand how they selected their victims, how they kept the secret for so long, and how this conduit truly worked. The hum in the chamber grew slightly louder, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to emanate from the very walls. It was a warning, a pulse, a heartbeat of the monstrous secret beneath the town. I clutched the journal to my chest, my mind racing, formulating a desperate plan. I was no longer a curious investigator. I was a survivor trapped in a town built on blood. And I was holding the key to its undoing. The question was, could I escape before I became another entry in their horrifying ledger? The question was, could I escape before I became another entry in their horrifying ledger? With the heavy leather-bound book clutched to my chest, its pages whispering the chilling secrets of Havenwood, I knew I had to try. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating silence of the hidden chamber beneath the town hall. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and something else. Something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood. It was a smell I now associated with the very foundation of this town. My fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled for the latch I'd seen on the grimy access panel. It groaned, stiff and old, but finally gave way. A sliver of light, weak and yellow, cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow, dusty service tunnel. It led, I hoped, away from the immediate danger of the town hall's main floor. I squeezed through the opening, pulling the panel shut behind me, plunging the chamber back into darkness. Every rustle of my clothes, every scuff of my shoe on the concrete floor, sounded deafening in the enclosed space. The tunnel was a labyrinth of pipes and exposed wiring, smelling of damp earth and stale air. I moved as quickly and quietly as possible, the ledger tucked securely inside my jacket, its weight a constant reminder of my burden and my mission. My mind raced, piecing together a desperate strategy. I needed to get out of Havenwood, and I needed to expose everything. But where? The town was a spiderweb and I was caught right in its center. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a dimly lit basement, likely a storage area for the town hall. Old files, forgotten furniture, and dusty boxes were stacked high, casting long, eerie shadows. A faint murmur of voices drifted down from above, the council members, no doubt realizing I was gone, perhaps even now searching for me. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down. Fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. I crept up a flight of creaking wooden stairs, my hand gripping a rusty railing. The voices grew louder, clearer. Mayor Thompson's booming tones, Reverend Miller's calm, measured cadence. They were discussing the breach, the compromise. They knew. They absolutely knew. I peered through a crack in the door at the top of the stairs. The town hall's main corridor was empty, but I could hear movement from the mayor's office. This was my chance. I pushed the door open just enough to slip through, then closed it silently behind me. The polished floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting my distorted, terrified face. My heart hammered against my ribs as I moved, a shadow hugging the walls, my gaze darting from side to side. Every closed door felt like a potential trap. Every distant sound made me flinch. I reached the main entrance, the heavy oak doors that had seemed so imposing just hours ago. They were locked. My breath hitched. Of course they were locked. They wouldn't just let me walk out. I ducked behind the reception desk, my mind scrambling. There had to be another way. A back entrance, an employee exit. I remembered seeing a small, unmarked door near the restrooms earlier. It was a long shot, but it was my only shot. I moved with renewed urgency, the distant voices of the founders growing more agitated. I could hear footsteps now, closer, searching. They were methodical, organized. They knew the building better than I knew my own apartment. I reached the small door. It was heavy steel with a push-bar handle. Pressed it, praying. It clicked open with a soft, metallic sigh. Freedom. Or at least, the next stage of my desperate gamble. I slipped out into the chilly night air, finding myself in a narrow alleyway behind the town hall, filled with overflowing dumpsters and the smell of stale garbage. The alley led to a side street, quiet and deserted, but the silence felt ominous, not peaceful. It was the silence of a predator stalking its prey. I broke into a run, heading away from the town center, towards the outskirts, towards the edge of the woods where I'd left my car. Or where I hoped it still was. My car, my phone, my only connection to the outside world. As I ran, I noticed something chilling. Most of the houses were dark, but faint lights flickered in windows I hadn't seen before. Figures moved in the shadows, not casually, but with purpose, like sentinels. The entire town was awake, on alert. They weren't just looking for me in the town hall, they were looking for me everywhere. Havenwood wasn't just a town with a secret. It was a living, breathing organism, designed to protect its dark heart. I veered off the main street, cutting through a small park, then through the backyard of an empty house. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but the adrenaline propelled me forward. I could hear the distant wail of a siren, not a police siren, but something else, a deep, unsettling hum that resonated through the quiet streets. It was an alarm. Their alarm. I reached the edge of the woods, the familiar scent of pine and damp earth a small comfort. My car should be just beyond these trees, parked discreetly off the main road. I pushed through the undergrowth, branches whipping at my face, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the ledger in my jacket. Then a flicker of headlights. Not my car. A black SUV, parked on the dirt track leading to where I'd left my vehicle. Two figures stood beside it, silhouetted against the weak moonlight. One was tall and lean, the other broader, more imposing. Even from a distance, I recognized the unmistakable, chilling presence of Mayor Thompson. And beside him, Reverend Miller, his usually placid face grim and set. They were waiting. They had anticipated my move. I froze, hidden in the shadows of the dense woods, my breath ragged. They knew this town intimately. They knew every escape route, every hiding place. They had been playing this game for generations. Mayor Thompson spoke, his voice carrying clearly on the still night air. He has the ledger. He knows everything. He cannot leave Havenwood. Reverend Miller nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the tree line, as if he could sense my presence. The cycle must not be broken, Mayor. Not now. Not ever. My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to stop me from exposing them, they were trying to stop me from disrupting their ritual. The ledger wasn't just proof. It was the sacred text of their horrifying agenda. I knew then that escaping wasn't enough. I had to destroy their cycle. I had to break it. But how? And could I even survive the night? I turned, backing deeper into the woods, away from the waiting SUV, away from the watchful eyes of the founders. I could hear their footsteps now, entering the woods, fanning out. They were hunting me. I was deep in their territory, a lone outsider against an entire town, armed only with the book of their darkest secrets. The woods, once a refuge, now felt like a vast, dark prison, and I was the desperate, cornered prey. My escape had just begun, and the real terror was about to unfold. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sent jolts of pure adrenaline through me. My breath hitched in my throat, a ragged gasp in the suffocating darkness. They were out there, I knew it. The council members, their faces twisted with a chilling blend of fear and righteous fury, were likely combing every inch of the forest. My mind raced, replaying the last moments in the old library, the flicker of desperation in their eyes as I clutched the heavy tome. They couldn't let me get away. This book, this record of their ancestors' twisted legacy, was their ultimate vulnerability. I pushed deeper, ignoring the scratches from branches, the sting of thorns, the burning in my lungs. My feet, already bruised and aching, pounded against the uneven earth. I had to find a way out, a path they wouldn't expect. My fingers, slick with sweat, gripped the worn leather cover of the Book of Founders. It was heavy, a physical burden, but also my only hope. I remembered seeing faint, almost illegible sketches within its pages, old survey maps, perhaps. Maps predating the current road system, showing ancient trails, forgotten passages. I stumbled, falling to my knees, the impact jarring my teeth. A wave of nausea washed over me, but I forced myself to stand. There, illuminated by the faint glow of my phone's dying flashlight, was a section of the book I hadn't fully processed. A hand-drawn map, dated centuries ago, detailing the original land grants. And snaking through the dense forest, almost obscured by time and neglect, was a dotted line marked Old Settlers' Path. It bypassed the main roads, skirted the edges of the town's official boundaries, and, crucially, led towards the highway that connected Havenwood to the wider world. It was a forgotten back door, a relic the council likely dismissed as irrelevant. With renewed purpose, I plunged into the undergrowth, following the barely perceptible depressions in the earth, the occasional moss-covered stone marker that hinted at a path long disused. The forest seemed to swallow me whole, but this time it felt less like a prison and more like a reluctant accomplice. Hours blurred into an eternity of fear and exertion. My muscles screamed, my throat was parched, but the thought of what I held, and what it meant for Havenwood, propelled me forward. Finally, just as the first sliver of dawn painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and gray, I saw it, the faint shimmer of asphalt through the trees. The highway. I stumbled out of the tree-line, my clothes torn, my body caked in mud and grime, looking like a ghost emerging from the wilderness. A gasp escaped my lips, a mix of relief and terror. I was out, but now the real challenge began. My phone was dead. I had no money, no car, just the book and a desperate need to expose the truth. I walked for what felt like miles along the shoulder of the highway, my mind racing. Who could I trust? Local authorities were compromised. State police might be a start, but the council's influence ran deep. I needed a bigger platform, an undeniable voice. Then a thought struck me. The internet. Anonymity. Reach. I flagged down a passing truck, a grizzled long-haul driver named Frank, who looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and pity. I spun a story about a car breakdown and a lost wallet, omitting the part about being hunted by a secret society. Frank, a good Samaritan despite his gruff exterior, agreed to drop me at the next truck stop, where I found an outlet to charge my phone and a surprisingly fast Wi-Fi connection. My hands trembled as I began to scan pages of the Book of Founders. Not just the damning ledgers, but the chilling philosophical treatises, the detailed genealogies, the sacrifices recorded with chilling bureaucratic precision. I focused on the sections detailing the Havenwood Doctrine, the true secret agenda. It wasn't just about power or money or even simple control. It was a radical, generations-long social experiment. The original founders, disillusioned by the perceived moral decay and corruption of the burgeoning nation, sought to create a perfect society, a secluded utopia built on absolute self-sufficiency, strict moral codes, and genetic purity. They believed that by isolating themselves, by controlling every aspect of their citizens' lives, from education to marriage to information, they could forge a superior lineage, a bastion of virtue untainted by the outside world. The disappearances of those who questioned the doctrine, those who sought outside knowledge, or those deemed genetically unsuitable for the founders' vision, were not random acts of cruelty. They were calculated measures to maintain the purity of their experiment. The book detailed the eugenics programs, the forced marriages, the systematic suppression of dissent, all rationalized as necessary steps to preserve their sacred purpose. The council members I had encountered weren't just greedy power brokers. They were zealous guardians of a twisted, inherited ideology, convinced they were protecting their ancestral dream. I compiled everything: the scanned documents, my own detailed testimony, a timeline of the disappearances, the hidden passages in the library, the names of the council. I sent it all anonymously to a major investigative journalism outlet known for its fearless reporting and its commitment to uncovering hidden truths. Then, for good measure, I sent copies to several other prominent news organizations and even a few well-known independent documentary filmmakers. I wanted to ensure that no single entity could suppress this story. The world shattered for Havenwood. Within days, the story broke, first as a whisper across obscure forums, then as a torrent across national news channels. The Havenwood Doctrine, America's hidden utopia, the town of secrets, the headlines screamed. The sheer volume and specificity of the evidence, coupled with my meticulously compiled testimony, made it impossible to ignore. Federal agents descended upon Havenwood like a storm. The council members, initially defiant, crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Their homes were raided, their offices sealed, their carefully constructed lives exposed to the harsh light of public scrutiny. Arrests followed swiftly, beginning with Mayor Thompson and extending to the other key figures I had identified. The ancient, revered Book of Founders, once the symbol of their absolute authority, became the ultimate instrument of their undoing. Its pages now evidence in a federal investigation. The town itself was ripped apart. Some residents, those who had always felt a subtle unease, a nagging suspicion about their insular community, were horrified but also vindicated. Others, those who had blindly accepted the narrative of their perfect town, were in shock, their entire reality crumbling around them. There were protests, accusations, tears, and a profound sense of betrayal that permeated every street, every home. The veneer of peace and prosperity was stripped away, revealing the dark, festering truth beneath. For me, the immediate danger was over, but my life was irrevocably changed. I became a key witness, placed under protective custody while the investigation unfolded. The anonymity I had initially sought was impossible to maintain. My story, my face, became synonymous with the unraveling of Havenwood. I was hailed as a hero by many, a truth-teller who brought light to the darkness. But I also knew that for some, those who still clung to the doctrine, or who felt their way of life had been unjustly destroyed, I would forever be an enemy. I never returned to Havenwood. The thought of stepping back into those streets, knowing the depths of the secrets they held, was too much. The old library, the town square, the seemingly idyllic houses, they would forever be tainted by the ghosts of the disappeared, by the echoes of a twisted dream. The truth, once hidden, has a way of reshaping everything. Havenwood, the town that built itself on secrecy and control, was forced to confront its own brutal history. It became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that utopias built on lies are nothing more than gilded cages, and that the pursuit of a perfect society, untempered by empathy and transparency, can lead to the darkest of human experiments. The Book of Founders, now a historical artifact under lock and key, served as a chilling testament to the dangers of unchecked power and the seductive allure of absolute control. It was a reminder that silence can be the most potent accomplice to evil, and that sometimes the greatest courage lies in being the one voice, however small, that dares to break it. The scars of Havenwood would remain, a permanent mark on the landscape, a silent scream against the darkness that had once thrived there. And I, the outsider who stumbled upon its truth, would carry the weight of that knowledge, forever changed by the secret agenda of the town's founders.